Okay, today we're working on a new Holland L553. Doing some wheel seal. I already did the other side, but obviously you can see from how wet this wheel is that the wheel seal is leaking down in there. And we need to pull it apart. Obviously jack up the front of your machine and put your boom up, get it out of your way. That way you can get to your tensioner down in here. Make sure you put your lock in for the boom. Get this tire off and I'll be right back. Okay, so we got our wheel off here. Get everything straight down best we can. Basically, the main cause of failure for these is twine, string, whatever. Usually, if it's a farm, you're not going to be able to prevent this from happening, but you gotta do your best to keep it picked out of there. Lasts you a lot longer. But right here is our chain tensioner. We're gonna loosen these two nuts, take off the outer nut, loosen the inside nut, back this off. Probably have to tap it with a hammer to get it loose, but definitely gonna spray it down here. Try to make it easier, but we'll see. Okay, so now we got our tensioner loosened up here. We're gonna come in here, and there's a little panel down here. So 4 bolts. And take them 4 bolts out and pop that panel off, and that's gonna give us access to our axle nut in the back side of our axle here, and then we'll be able to pull it out. But we gotta another step. You're gonna want to make some studs here. I wouldn't recommend doing it any other way than this. I did the other side a different way, and what happened was the inner bearing that is on the inside of the case here, which you can't get to it. If you pull off the side cover here, giant tensioner in there, you can't get to anything up in here. The inner bearing will fall into the case because the sprocket will be loose once you take the nut off the axle, and it's just a huge hassle. Not a good time at all. I had to fish wire down in there, pick the bearing up out. Just a bad time. But I read online, if you take some 5/16 by 18 all thread, put nuts on the end, thread them in that hole to hold the gear in place, it will hold the inner bearing in place, and then you don't have to worry about any of that shit falling out on you. So I got my all thread here, 5/16 by 18. I'm gonna cut a couple pieces of this off and pull the cover, and I'll be back. Okay, so we got our all thread made here, double nutted on the end so we can use them as a bolt with threads the whole way pretty much. But one thing I forgot to tell you is these chain cases on these machines are actually the hydraulic reservoir too, and you can see how close it is to being flush there. I am parked on kind of a unlevel here, so that may be why it's not leaking, but you might lose some fluid out of there. You might need to drain it, but just a heads up. I'm gonna go ahead and thread my studs in there tight against the gear, and then we'll pop that axle nut off and see what, pull the shaft out. Okay, so we'll get our studs in here. We only got 3 in there, but you can see how they're pressed up against the gear. You can't really see the other ones, but the 4th one at 3 inches long, they're a little longer. I mean, obviously you can see we have a little bit of room to go in still if we have to, but the steel line on the right side is in your way. If you had a welder and you can weld the nut on the very end, then you may be able to cut the stud a little shorter and not have the double nuts and still be able to use your 4th one. But I'm pretty sure with just 3, that'll be fine for us to hold it in. But the next step is to pull out cotter pin, and there is a little cap that goes over top of the nut. You can see it there. I believe it depends on how old the machine is, whether you have that cap or not. but this machine does, so we're gonna remove it. Then we'll take the nut off and pull the shaft out. Okay, so got our axle out. Once you get the nut and everything off the backside, there's 2 washers on there. Make sure you do not drop them in there. Then you want to come out here and tap your axle out just with a rubber mallet or a hammer. I mean, really not going to fucking hurt that thing. But come in here, pop your 2 old seals out. And some looks like somebody RTV'd these in here before. We're going to clean all that stuff out of there. And this ring here where the seals ride is worn out. You can see the big grooves on there where the seals ride. That's going to need replaced. As you can see, it's just a sleeve that goes over the top of that. They're usually pretty tight. You probably have to take a cotton torch, heat this up, just very lightly nick it. Or even if you heat it up, just going around heating it up, you might be able to pop it up off. But so we need to do that, clean this up, get our new 2 seals installed. And there is a specific way we need to install these seals, and I'll make sure I film that. Okay, so we got our surfaces all cleaned up. I scraped all the RTV out. I mean, there'll be a little bit there, but it ain't gonna hurt nothing. Scraped it all out. Take a piece of 120 grit sandpaper around here. Make sure you didn't nick the lip or anything when you're pulling the seals out. But when we reinstall the seals, there's 2 seals. The first one is an oil seal here. This is gonna go in first. And the spring side of the seal always goes towards the oil or grease or whatever the lubricant is. That's gonna go in that way. The outside seal is a dirt seal. This keeps the dirt from getting in. There's no spring on this one, but you want your lip to face out like that. So that is the orientation of your seals. You can see there. Sorry if this is blurry, but that's what you want it to look like when you get back together. Use a seal driver. If you don't have a seal driver, just be careful when you're going around. Make sure it goes in even. Last thing you want is to put these seals in and have one be messed up and have to tear it all back apart. One other thing I forgot to say is, on this machine it's not that important because obviously your bearing fits right through here. But on other applications, make sure your bearing's in first before you put your seals in. I'll put it in there first just for peace of mind, but don't forget to put the bearing in. Okay, now we got our seals in there the correct way. Got our bearing inside. I'm gonna take a little grease these seals a little bit just to help it slide in on the axle shaft. Slide my axle back in and reinstall our nut. The nut on the inside, I do not know what the correct torque is for it, but usually anything tapered roller bearing. Snug your nut up. You're not here. Make sure all this stuff's clean too. Snug the nut up, back it off a full turn, and then snug it up to around 50 foot-pounds. If you really want to torque it, put your little castle nut clip back in and your cotter pin, and you should have a good preset in your bearings. And just make sure it's not super tight. Make sure you can actually wiggle the wheel a little bit. We'll get to that, but that's pretty much it. Get back to you as soon as I get this in here. All right, so got our nut back on. Please replace your cotter pin. The last thing you want to do is put your old cotter pin back in and it end up breaking and falling out, and you're just gonna have a whole mess in your hands. So if you don't have cotter pins, just get, when you're buying your all thread to do this, just pick up a little kit of them. But basically, yeah, we got the nut on there, the castle lock back on. We're gonna take our studs back out, and then we need to clean the surface where the plate goes on. I already cleaned up the plate here. Make sure there's no silicone left on there. Clean that all up. Use some brake clean everything. And I'm gonna use some black RTV on there and put our bolts back in, snug them down, and reinstall the tire. We'll have to tighten our chain back up here also. and then we should be good to go. All right, well, we're back together here. Got our cover back on. See the RTV coming out the side a little bit. You don't want to put not enough on there. Too much ain't gonna hurt nothing. Roll our bolts in there, and then make sure you clean your hub up real good. I mean, I don't have access to a hose or anything here, so I brake cleaned it off as much as I could around there. That way I'm gonna take this thing for a spin here, work it around a little bit, make sure there's no oil in there. I mean, obviously you can see the wheels still got oil in it, but as long as you can check your spindle there, make sure there's no oil in it, you should be good to go. Don't mind that. These are solid tires. Yeah, hopefully this video helped you. I mean, I didn't see much about this online at all, other than the one right up where the guy had wrote up about making these here, and honestly, God, this is a lifesaver. Definitely do this. I highly recommend it. You could take this from being a 2-hour project to a 4-hour project if you don't. So, but yeah, thanks for watching.